Hello, everyone, and welcome back to your daily English dose. Today, we have a very special story for you. It's a story about promises, memory, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. In a world that is always changing, what does it mean to hold on to a promise? What does it mean to be a beacon of hope when all other lights go out? This story, titled The Lighthouse Keeper's Promise, will take you to a remote, windswept island where an old man has a date with destiny. As you listen, pay attention to the words and phrases that describe emotions and scenery. This will be great practice for your listening and reading comprehension. So find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin our journey. The Sentinel of the Sea, as the locals called it, was more than just a lighthouse. It was a stone giant standing guard at the edge of the world. For 70 years, its powerful beam of light had cut through the thickest fog and the wildest storms, guiding sailors safely home. And for 50 of those years, Silas Blackwood had been its keeper. Silas was a man carved from the same rugged landscape as the island he called home. His face was a map of wrinkles, each line telling a story of salty winds and sleepless nights. His hands, though gnarled and stiff with age, still knew every gear, every lens, and every secret of the old lighthouse. He moved with a slow, deliberate pace, a rhythm learned from the steady rise and fall of the tides. His world was a circle of stone and glass, a spiral staircase, and a breathtaking view of the endless ocean. He lived a life of solitude, but he was never truly lonely. The lighthouse was his companion, its steady pulse of light, a conversation that lasted for decades. He knew its groans in the wind, its shivers in the cold, and the way the morning sun warmed its stone walls. But things were changing. The world outside his stone tower was moving faster than ever before. New, automated navigation systems were making lighthouses like his obsolete. They were relics of a bygone era, beautiful but no longer essential. His lighthouse, the Sentinel, was scheduled to be decommissioned in 1 week. Silas's long watch was finally coming to an end. Retirement. The word felt foreign on his tongue, like a language he had never learned. What does a lighthouse keeper do when there is no light to keep? Each morning, Silas would climb the 137 steps to the lantern room, just as he had done for 50 years. He'd polish the giant Fresnel lens until it sparkled like a diamond, his reflection a ghostly figure in its curved surface. He'd check the machinery, the well-oiled gears that turned the massive light, even though the new automated system had taken over that duty years ago. It was a ritual, a way of honoring the life he had built. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Silas sat in his small living quarters at the base of the lighthouse. A framed photograph sat on his worn wooden desk. It was a picture of his late wife, Elara. Her smile was as bright and warm as the lighthouse beam itself. She had passed away 5 years ago, leaving a silence in the tower that even the roaring sea could not fill. Elara had loved the lighthouse as much as he did. She used to say, "Our light, Silas, it's more than just a warning. It's a promise. A promise that no matter how dark the night gets, there is always a way home. It's a beacon of hope." He traced the edge of the photograph with his finger. "A beacon of hope," he whispered to the empty room. "But what happens when the beacon goes dark, my love?" His heart felt heavy with a sense of loss that was twofold. He was losing Elara all over again. And he was losing the only home, the only purpose he had ever known. The young man from the mainland who had come to install the final automated sensors a month ago had been polite, but his words stung. "It's amazing, Mr. Blackwood. All this can now be run from a control center miles away. Progress, you know." Silas knew progress. He had seen ships change from wood to steel, navigation from stars to satellites. But he also knew that technology could fail. A machine didn't have a heart. It couldn't feel the shift in the wind, or hear the desperate prayer of a sailor lost in the storm. It only knew ones and zeros. on and off. As evening approached, a change began to creep into the air. The sky, once a gentle canvas of sunset colors, was now bruised with shades of gray and deep indigo. The wind, usually a familiar whisper, began to howl with a new, menacing tone. Silas had seen enough storms to know that this was no ordinary squall. The sea was growing restless, its waves crashing against the rocky shore with increasing violence. The seagulls, usually circling overhead, had long since vanished, seeking shelter inland. This was the kind of storm that tested the resolve of both ships and men. This was a storm that legends were made of. Silas stood in the lantern room, his hand resting on the cool glass of the window, and watched the storm gather its strength. The sea had turned into a chaotic mass of churning white-capped waves. Rain began to lash against the lighthouse, each drop hitting the glass like a tiny stone. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, shaking the ancient tower to its very foundations. He felt the vibration through the soles of his worn leather boots, a deep rumble that seemed to come from the heart of the island itself. He had weathered hundreds of storms in this tower, but there was something different about this one. It felt personal, as if the ocean itself was raging against his impending departure. Or perhaps, he thought, it was just the storm in his own heart, mirroring the chaos outside. His radio crackled to life. It was a young fisherman from the nearby village, a man named Finn. "Silas? You there, old man? This storm is a bad one," came out of nowhere. "We're heading back in, but the sea is fighting us every step of the way. Just wanted to make sure your newfangled light is working. We're counting on it." Silas gripped the receiver. "It's working, Finn. The automated system is on. But be careful, son. I've never seen the sea this angry. Don't you worry about us, Silas. We've got all the new gear. GPS, radar. Not like the old days, eh? Just keep that light shining. Over and out." The line went dead, leaving only the sound of static and the roaring wind. Not like the old days. Finn's words echoed in his mind. The young fisherman trusted his technology, his screens and satellites. Silas trusted his gut, the feeling in his bones that told him this night would be long and hard. He hoped, for Finn's sake, that the new gear was as reliable as the young man believed. As darkness fell completely, the storm intensified. The lighthouse beam, now fully automated, swept across the tumultuous waves in its predictable mechanical rhythm. On, off. On, off. It was perfect, efficient, and cold. It lacked the human touch, the slight, almost imperceptible variations that Silas used to impart, a silent language he shared with the sailors who knew his light. He made his way down the spiral staircase to his small kitchen. He brewed a cup of strong, black tea, the warmth of the mug, a small comfort in his cold, steady hands. He thought of Elara. She had loved storms. She said they made her feel alive, a part of something wild and powerful. She would stand at the window, her face lit by the flashes of lightning, and she would sing. Her voice was a melody that could calm even the most savage gale. He remembered one storm, years ago, when their daughter Maria was just a little girl. She had been terrified of the thunder. Elara had held her close, right here in this small kitchen, and she had told her a story. "The thunder," she had said, "is just the sky rearranging its furniture. And the lightning, that's just the angels taking pictures." Maria had giggled, her fear forgotten. Silas smiled at the memory, a brief moment of warmth in the growing cold of the night. But the smile quickly faded. Maria lived on the mainland now, with a family of her own. She called every Sunday, her voice filled with a cheerful concern that only made him feel older. "Dad, are you sure you're okay out there all alone? You should come live with us." "The city is exciting." He knew she meant well. But the city was not his world. His world was this rock, this tower, this light. And it was all about to be taken away from him, Suddenly, with a deafening crack of thunder that seemed to split the very sky, the lights in his room flickered and died. The entire lighthouse was plunged into an unnerving, absolute darkness. His breath caught in his throat. He waited, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. The emergency generator should have kicked in. But there was only silence. A heavy, oppressive silence, broken only by the relentless fury of the storm outside. A cold dread washed over him. He stumbled in the dark, his hands searching for the wall, and made his way to the window. He peered out into the black, rain-swept night. The powerful, sweeping beam of the lighthouse was gone. The Sentinel of the sea was blind. And out there, somewhere in that raging, merciless darkness, Finn's boat was trying to find its way home. For a moment, Silas felt a paralyzing sense of helplessness. The automated system, the symbol of progress that was meant to make him obsolete, had failed. The generator, its supposed fail-safe, had failed. The technology that everyone trusted had abandoned them in their most desperate hour. His heart pounded against his ribs. He thought of Finn, of his young family waiting for him in the village. He thought of all the other sailors who might be out there, navigating the treacherous waters, relying on the light that was no longer there. He thought of Elara's words. "It's a promise, Silas. A promise that there is always a way home." The promise. That single thought ignited a fire within him, a flame that had been smoldering for years. This was his tower. This was his light, and as long as he drew breath, he would not let it fail. His retirement could wait. His sorrow could wait. The storm was here, now, and he was still the keeper. With a surge of adrenaline he hadn't felt in years, Silas turned from the window and headed for a heavy wooden door set in the base of the tower. Behind it lay the old engine room, the heart of the lighthouse before the age of automation. It was a place of iron and grease, a relic of a time when light was made by hand, by sweat, and by unwavering dedication. He fumbled for the iron key that always hung on a nail by the doorframe. His fingers, numb with cold and age, struggled with the lock. Finally, with a loud click, the door swung open, revealing a cavern of darkness that smelled of rust and cold oil. He lit an old kerosene lamp, its flickering flame casting long, dancing shadows across the room. There it was. The old manual mechanism. A complex assembly of massive gears, counterweights, and a hand crank big enough to require the strength of 2 men. For decades before the electric motor was installed, this was how the light was turned. It was a grueling, back-breaking task, requiring constant rhythmic effort to keep the massive lens rotating at the correct speed. It had been more than 20 years since he had last used it. Could he still do it? Alone? At his age? Doubt was a luxury he could not afford. There was no time to question, only to act. He grabbed a heavy wrench and went to work. The gears were stiff, the metal cold and reluctant. He put his shoulder into it, grunting with effort, his muscles screaming in protest. He could hear Elara's voice in his memory, singing a soft sea shanty, a tune she always hummed when he was working on the engine. The memory gave him strength. Slowly, painstakingly, he re-engaged the old system. He checked the counterweights, a system of heavy ropes and pulleys that ran the height of the tower. Everything had to be perfect. One mistake, one slip, and the mechanism could jam, or worse, shatter the priceless lens above. His work was illuminated by the single, swaying flame of the lamp. The shadows it cast made the machinery look like a sleeping iron beast, and he, the old keeper, was trying to wake it from its long slumber. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, it was ready. The manual crank was engaged. Now came the hardest part. He had to get to the lantern room to light the lamp manually, the old way with a flame. The automated bulb was useless without electricity. He took a deep breath, grabbed his box of long-stemmed matches and the kerosene lamp, and began the long climb up the 137 steps. The climb was an ordeal. The wind shrieked through the stone tower, and Silas could feel the structure swaying slightly, a ship in a violent sea. His legs ached, his lungs burned. Each step was a battle against his own aging body and the fury of the storm. He held the lamp tightly, shielding its precious flame with his hand, for it was the only source of light he had. It was his seed of hope. When he finally reached the lantern room, he was panting, his body trembling with exhaustion. But there was no time for rest. The air was cold, and the sound of the storm was deafening at this height. Rain hammered against the thick glass, and for a terrifying moment, he saw a crack of lightning illuminate the chaotic sea below. The waves were mountainous, their peaks lost in the blackness of the sky. He set the lamp down carefully and approached the heart of the light, the giant oil lamp assembly. It was a magnificent piece of brass and glass, a testament to the craftsmanship of a forgotten age. He opened the glass casing, his hand surprisingly steady. He trimmed the wick, his movements precise and practiced, a muscle memory that time had not erased. His mind was clear, his focus absolute. All the sorrow, the loneliness, the feeling of being left behind by the modern world, it all melted away. There was only the task at hand, the promise to keep. He struck a match. The first one was extinguished by a draft of wind that found its way through a crack in the old window frame. He shielded the box with his body and struck another. This time the flame caught. He carefully brought the tiny, flickering light to the wick. The wick sputtered for a second, then caught, and a warm, golden glow began to fill the lantern room. It wasn't the harsh, white glare of the electric bulb, but a soft, living light. It felt like a heartbeat. He closed the glass casing and took a step back, his chest heaving. The light was on, but it was stationary. A fixed point in the darkness was not enough. It needed to sweep, to rotate, to send its message of hope across the waves. Now he had to return to the engine room and begin the impossible task of turning the crank. The journey down was even more treacherous. His legs felt like lead. He had to hold on to the railing with both hands to keep his balance. Back in the engine room, he stood before the giant hand crank. It looked like the wheel of a great ship. He took off his coat, rolled up his sleeves, and took a firm grip. He planted his feet and threw his entire body weight into the first turn. The mechanism groaned in protest, a deep, metallic screech that echoed through the tower. For a moment, nothing happened. Silas's heart sank. Had he failed? He pushed again, harder this time, every muscle in his old body straining. He felt a slight movement, a slow, agonizing turn. He pushed again and again, establishing a rhythm. Groan, turn, click. Groan, turn, click. He was breathing heavily, sweat pouring down his face, but he didn't stop. He imagined the great lens far above him, beginning its slow, majestic rotation. The golden light, his light, was now moving, sweeping across the dark sea. He imagined Finn, out on his boat, seeing that familiar beam cut through the rain and darkness. "Hold on, son," Silas muttered through clenched teeth. "Just hold on. The Sentinel is watching over you." The work was relentless. There could be no pause. If he stopped, the light would stop. He had to maintain a constant speed, a steady rhythm. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. His arms ached, his back was on fire, and his vision began to blur. The engine room, with its dancing shadows, started to spin around him. He thought of Elara. He could almost feel her presence beside him, her hand on his shoulder, her voice a soothing balm. "You can do it, my love. You are stronger than any storm." He closed his eyes, focusing on the rhythm, groan, turn, click. It became a mantra, a prayer. He was no longer just a man turning a crank. He was the heart of the lighthouse, his own life force, pushing the light, pushing the promise, out into the storm. He was a part of something ancient and powerful, a link in a long chain of keepers who had stood watch on this very rock, their dedication, a silent testament to the enduring power of hope. The storm raged on, its fury unabated. The wind and rain were a constant assault, and the sea roared its endless anger. Inside the engine room, Silas was in a world of his own, a world of pain, exhaustion, and singular purpose. The rhythm was all that existed. Groan, turn, click. His body screamed for him to stop, but his spirit refused to listen. Time lost all meaning. Was it midnight? Was it almost dawn? He didn't know. The flame of the kerosene lamp flickered, casting his giant, weary shadow against the wall. The shadow moved in time with his efforts, a ghostly dance partner in his solitary struggle. His mind began to play tricks on him. The roar of the storm became a symphony of voices. He heard the cries of sailors from long-forgotten shipwrecks. He heard the cheerful voice of the young man who had spoken of progress. He heard his daughter, Maria, begging him to come away from the sea. And then, clear as a bell, he heard Elara singing. Her voice was not just a memory anymore. It was real, filling the cold engine room with its warmth. It was the same sea shanty she always sang, a simple melody of love and longing. He looked up, half expecting to see her standing in the doorway, her smile chasing away the shadows. "I'm here, Silas," the voice seemed to say. "I'm with you. Just a little longer. Keep the light turning. Keep the promise." A tear traced a path through the grime and sweat on his cheek. He wasn't alone. He found a new reserve of strength, a power that came not from his muscles but from his heart. His movements became stronger, more certain. He was turning the crank for Elara, for Finn, for every soul who had ever looked to a lighthouse for hope. But his body was failing him. A sharp pain shot through his chest. His vision swam, and the room tilted violently. His grip on the crank loosened. "No!" he gasped, his voice a ragged whisper. "Not yet!" He collapsed against the mechanism, his body slumping to the floor. The great gears began to slow, their groaning protests fading into a low hum. The light, far above, was stopping its life-saving sweep. He lay on the cold stone floor, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "This is it," he thought. "I failed. Elara, I'm sorry." But then, through the haze of exhaustion, he saw something. The photograph of Elara, which he had left on his desk upstairs, seemed to be sitting on a crate in front of him. In the flickering lamplight, her smile seemed to encourage him, to urge him to rise. It was a hallucination, he knew, a trick of a tired mind. But it was enough. With a cry that was more of a roar of defiance, Silas pushed himself up. He ignored the fire in his chest and the weakness in his limbs. He grabbed the crank with both hands, his knuckles white. He poured the last ounce of his being, the sum of his 50 years of service, into one final desperate effort. The gears shrieked back to life, the rhythm returned. Groan, turn, click. He kept his eyes fixed on the image of Elara, real or not. And he pushed on through the darkest hours of the night, a lone sentinel against the rage of the sea. As the first faint hint of dawn began to touch the eastern sky, the storm began to lose its power. The wind's howl softened to a mournful cry, and the relentless pounding of the rain eased to a steady drumming. Slowly, majestically, the gray light of a new day seeped into the world, revealing a sea that was still angry, but no longer monstrous. Silas was still on his feet, still turning the crank, but his movements were slow, almost robotic. He was running on sheer will. He didn't notice the storm was ending. He only knew the rhythm. Then he heard it. A new sound, cutting through the wind, a rhythmic thumping. He looked up, confused. The sound grew louder. A helicopter. He saw its lights through the small, grimy window of the engine room. And then he heard another sound. The loud, clear blast of a ship's horn, a sound of arrival, of safety. He let go of the crank. The mechanism slowly wound down, and the great light came to a rest. Silas slid down the wall and sat on the floor, the deep silence of the tower enveloping him. He had done it. His watch was over. He closed his eyes and let the darkness claim him, a peaceful smile on his weary face. When Silas awoke, the warm light of the afternoon sun was streaming through the window of his bedroom. He was in his own bed. A thick blanket was tucked around him. For a moment he was confused. He tried to sit up, but a gentle hand pushed him back down. It was Maria, his daughter. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling. "Dad, just rest. The doctor said you're okay, just exhausted." "Maria? What? How?" he stammered. "The Coast Guard brought me over. They found you in the engine room." "Dad, what were you thinking? You could have—" She couldn't finish the sentence. She just shook her head, a mixture of fear and admiration in her eyes. "The light," Silas said, his voice hoarse. "The power went out. The boat. Finn's boat." "They're safe, Dad," she said softly. "They all are." They made it back to the harbor just after dawn. Finn told everyone. He said the lighthouse beam vanished, and they thought they were lost. Then it came back on. He said it was like a miracle, a steady, golden light that guided them through the worst of it. He said he knew it was you. Tears welled up in Silas's eyes. He had not failed. His promise was kept. Later that day, there was a soft knock on the door. It was Finn. The young fisherman stood there, his hat in his hands, his face etched with a gratitude so deep it needed no words. "Silas," he began, his voice thick with emotion. We wouldn't have made it. My crew, we all have families. When that light came back on, it was everything. All my new gadgets were useless. The GPS was haywire. But your light, it was true. It was a promise." Finn stepped forward and placed a small, hand-carved wooden boat on Silas's bedside table. "It's not much, but my son made it for you. He wants to be a lighthouse keeper when he grows up." Silas looked at the small boat, then at Finn, and then at his daughter. The room was filled with a warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. The silence that Elara had left behind was finally filled, not with the roaring of the sea, but with the quiet hum of connection, of gratitude, of love. 1 week later, on a calm, sunny day, Silas stood at the base of the lighthouse for the last time. A small ceremony was being held for its decommissioning. The officials from the mainland spoke of progress, efficiency, and the future. But the entire village had turned out too. They weren't there to see a machine switched off. They were there to honor their keeper. When the ceremony was over, Finn and the other fishermen came to him. They didn't say much. They just shook his hand, one by one, their eyes saying everything that needed to be said. As Silas boarded the boat to take him to the mainland to live with Maria, he looked back at the Sentinel of the sea. Its light was dark, its long watch finally over. But he knew that a light is more than just a beam in the night. It's the memory of the hands that kept it. It's the stories of the lives it saved. And it's the promise that lives on in the hearts of those it guided home. And as the boat pulled away from the island, Silas Blackwood, the last keeper of the Sentinel, knew that his own light, the light of his promise to Elara, would never truly go out. And that is the end of our story. I hope the lighthouse keeper's promise has touched your heart. This story reminds us that sometimes the old ways, the ways of the heart and human dedication, are the most powerful forces of all. It also shows us that our purpose in life can be found in the promises we keep, both to others and to ourselves. Thank you for joining us on your Daily English Dose. If you enjoyed this story and found it helpful for your English practice, please give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Silas's story? What words or parts of the story did you find most powerful? Sharing your thoughts is a great way to practice your English writing skills. Thanks again for listening. Keep practicing, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next video.